In this keynote, we will listen to the opinion of Professor David Richardson from Lineus University in Sweden concerning synchronous and asynchronous teaching, presence, distance, traditional lessons and MOOCs.
Reflection about synchronous and asynchronous teaching, presence or distance, traditional classrooms, MOOCs, and other things. It was supposed that David Richardson from Kalmar University, Lineus University, should be with us. I will make a short introduction. During the last decades, we have, I'd say, quite important challenge about these subjects. 10 years ago, I am using virtual classrooms since more than 10 years. And when I needed to use a virtual classroom, I need to go to the university because I had no bandwidth available at all. Today, we can make it all over with small computers, Wi-Fi's, portable gadgets. We can make it in a very, very easy way. So the technology is not a problem today. Problem today is the methodology. Because if you have money enough, in a few hours you can buy something like this. But to be prepared to use it properly maybe take you some months or even years. Because it's not the same thing to make it in a presence classroom or in a virtual environment. It's not the technology. The methods we should use to engage our students, to communicate, to distribute our contents, to evaluate. These are really new challenges for all of us. Remember, a children to start speaking takes between 1 and 2 years. But to start writing, it takes about 10 years to write it properly. So this is more or less the same thing. If we are in a presence classroom, we can make it without thinking, easily. Of course, we need methodologies as well. But in virtual environment, it's much more difficult and challenge is much stronger. So, but we have all of this. People are discussing, shall we use e-learning or shall we use B-learning? But the question is, what is B-learning? Many people still think that B-learning is presence and distance. In fact, it was. Because today, we have tools to deliver our contents in a synchronous format. And to make synchronous activities in presence or in virtual format. We have all the tools to do this in virtual environment. But what is very strange, that still in many countries, the law is compulsive, and you must do courses in presence and virtual. They are, you see, they are limiting the teachers for what it is, the new challenges, the new approaches of methodologies, and all things like this. We have to evolve not only teachers, but the legal environment to let us make the best of ourselves. So I would like to listen your opinion about this subject as well. Of course, we are not going to define laws, rules for this, but we are just reflecting about this subject. Before we go on, I would like to introduce Professor João Duque. João is a good friend of mine. He is the director of Faculty of Economy and Management in Lisbon University. And João, it's a pleasure and an honor that you are with us. Hello. Hello, João. Okay. I would like other colleagues will show and light their cameras and audio, please, just to participate more actively in the debate. Would you like to say something about this subject, or shall we ask some of the colleagues to say something about this? Ângela, I'd like to listen to your opinion about this. You have been with me in a distance course I know that you have a fair experience about this subject, and you are in a good position to comment from presence to virtual.
Thank you, Antonio, for having the possibility to participate in this conference. Based on the experience that I have in terms of the implementation of virtual training, the results are very effective because we can combine both. In terms of having more effective training, the participants can make pre-work before the training session using e-learning materials, making their preparation with gamification, with other materials they can bring to the room, to the face-to-face classroom. They come much more prepared. We can spend less time in classroom, and that's the reason we say it's more effective. And after the face-to-face session, we can implement it virtually using the sustainability implementation process. How? We can make a virtual meeting with the participants to check the level of learning from all the content and all the materials. And this kind of training process where we have virtual classroom and virtual again, it's a way to reinforce the knowledge of the participants. Depending of the goals and depending of the results, we must deliver a training plan and to use one or another way of delivering training.
Thank you, Ângela. So you can see opinions from different angles. We have a perspective of the teacher, or let's say academic, or a perspective of a professional training involved in projects all over the world. Ângela gave us her opinion as a professional trainer of a multinational company. Can I have another comment? Some comments from the auditorium?
David Richardson, Professor David Richardson from Lineus University. Thank you very much to accept to participate in this debate. I think it's a challenging big debate because we have been involving many other scholars and experts from other different universities, but your target is to comment how shall we evolve from presence teaching to B-learning. Let's say B-learning should be something like what is the school of the future or many other things, beautiful names that we can have around. But we are dividing our presentation in several, let's say, stages. Methodological environment, technological and software options. We have to take it to use which will be the most convenient for our process. Methodologies, teacher skills and behaviors. We know that if you have a budget, you can buy all the equipment in 1 week, but to change behaviors, to give skills sometimes takes between 1 and 2 years. Good practices. This is the final topic. And let's start about our question, or let's say our topic. Compare e-learning generations. Today we have evolved from what it was delivering contents, some asynchronous interactivity and synchronous interactivity with asynchronous delivering of contents, which we can call B-learning. And this B-learning can be today defined in a different way that we was defining it about 8 to 10 years ago. Because e-learning 10 years ago it was presence and distance. But today we have asynchronous activities that we deliver in our platforms and synchronous activities that we can make in presence or virtual environment using a virtual classroom. This is, let's say, basically our discussion.
But we should never forget, in 2001, Rosenberg said that in the future there will be a most radical revolution than e-learning. It will be the disappearing of the E. This means that it's unthinkable that we will not use in our present classrooms, let's say, virtual teaching as well, or if we are making our distance teaching, if we will not use synchronous activities. But let's go in more details about this. So, learning today is teaching process supported in electronic media distributed contents in multiple formats, and interactivity based on web technologies. Doesn't matter if it will be asynchronous or synchronous, in distance or in presence teaching. And this is what we can call the future today. So the question now about the next topic, technical and software options. We have to evaluate two types of virtual classrooms. Interactivity based on this, hardware-based equipments and software-based equipments. These equipments are, let's say, the software-based equipments. You just need your computer and the software. They are much softer. You can just install it, make it by yourself, and if you use hardware-based equipment, as it was 10, 15 years ago, these equipments needs a much more higher bandwidth. They are much more expensive, and they are not flexible as we are using these equipments today. So let's listen to the opinion of several experts. George Simmons: the PC-based virtual classrooms are much better. They allow us to support our students when they need and where they want. Norbert Pachler: mobile communication technologies based on PC are much superior than the hardware-based. They are portable and flexible. Johnny Bedin from Lineus University. John said, I'm in favor of using PC-based virtual classrooms because they are flexible and can be used any place. And about David Richardson. Hi David, you know this man?
I think so. I think I kind of recognize him.
Yes, please. Go on.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm in agreement with the other experts as well. I mean, I'd like to just give you a quick historical view as well, because the internet came to Sweden in the turn of 1993, 1994. And in those days, there was a big difference between people who used e-learning and people who didn't. I mean, it was almost like two completely separate types of teacher. And there was a lot of discussion in those days about whether there was going to be some kind of special pedagogy for e-learning that was markedly different from presence learning. But that's a discussion that we don't have anymore, because it's become normal for all teachers to be using this type of technology, and when you do it, you suddenly find that the distinctions between what goes on inside your classroom and what goes on outside your classroom start to fade away. And that's where the flexibility of PC-based systems or computer-based systems for things like video conferencing comes in, because you can't sort of shunt everybody over to some kind of video conference room anymore and also hope that your people at the other end are shuntable into a video conference room. So the kind of situation that I'm often in is, if we take something like Adobe, right, is that I'm using things like my iPhone and an iPad very often in a classroom with real people, and also connecting that classroom to people who are somewhere else. So it's like, yeah, exactly, yeah, precisely. So like the distinction there is disappearing. And then one last thing. The process that I've experienced and that I've had in the last, say, 20 years has been a process by which the technology has been needing to catch up with the demands that teachers are making on it. But actually the technology has caught up now, so that in order to implement successful learning with some sort of technological base, you don't need such fancy equipment anymore, and it's not very expensive anymore. Antonio?
Let me see about your currents since 4 years ago when we debate this subject. You said, you remember?
Quite.
Hardware equipments are dyno equipments, so outdated. That's the same thing you are pointing us today.
Yes.
See. So this is really old-fashioned equipment. Today we have to compare software-based equipments, let's say virtual classrooms based on software. And we have made inquiry and research about this. This was in 2008. Maratech was not yet sold to YouTube and to Google. And Maratech, it was in that period, according to our survey, the top virtual classroom used it in that moment. Illuminate, it was in second place, and Adobe Connect third. And after, Open Virtual Classrooms. We have compared them. We have arrived to this conclusion, but we find out that the two top technologies were Adobe and Illuminate. We developed a methodology to compare there. It was based on custom satisfaction criteria. We developed 22 criteria in order to compare both classrooms. In fact, 12 of those criteria were very similar between Adobe and Illuminate. And after that, we have found that 10 criteria were in favor of Adobe. So this, the final conclusion is that according to an ideal profile of a virtual classroom, we have the conclusion was that Adobe was fulfilling 81.7% and Illuminate 58.2%. David, from your experience about using virtual classrooms, can you give us a comment and your opinion about this?
Sure. One of the questions that I often get asked internally is, how come that you're in favor of open source systems when it comes to a learning management system like Moodle, but you are not in favor of open source systems when it comes to this kind of virtual classroom environment? And at the moment, I would say that what you need to do in order to keep something like Adobe Connect working and developing requires a different type of programming compared with something like a learning management system. So I think that it's no accident, it's no surprise that the open source virtual classrooms have tended to lag behind and probably will never catch up, whereas Adobe have got the resources to actually keep Adobe Connect not only working but also developing. And I think if you look at the last two, if you look at the last two updates of the Adobe Connect system, they've been really, really good. And those of us who've used Adobe Connect for a long time, I mean, I've been using it live since January 2008 now, have seen a marked improvement in quality, in the way that the way the system works and that kind of thing. So, and again, I don't think that's an accident, because to get real-time video and audio plus shared screens, etc., demands a lot of computing power.
In the next question I would like to submit to you.
Sure.
And the next question is if we can do more or less the same activities that you are doing in a presence classroom as you can do in a virtual classrooms, or is it something plus in one side or something less in the other, or they are about the same?
Well, again, I think that it depends what kind of virtual classroom you're talking about. But if you include something like Second Life, I would say yes, nearly 100%. There are, of course, reasons why a presence classroom can still work better than any of the virtual ones we've got yet. But on the other hand, when you look at what most teachers do most of the time, I'd say, you know, as good as 100%. Now, one of the things that we need to kind of bear in mind is that these virtual classrooms are getting better. And as some of your, I mean, if we look at what Norbert Pachler says here, one of the things that you can't get away with is his third point, which is just to say, take a presence lesson and stick it on in a virtual environment. That's not going to work. I mean, we'll put it like this. We haven't made it work yet. But on the other hand, if you change your thinking, change your behavior, there's absolutely no reason to look down on virtual classrooms, I would say.
You are not alone. Norbert Pachler just says more or less the same thing you are saying.
Yeah.
But I remember when we discussed this subject about 4 years ago, you gave me this example I am just showing you now, which is we can do more or less the same things, or even we should do this kind of training in virtual environment before we do in real life. Let's see what can be done. Not face-to-face, but face-to-back, as you in a jokey way presented. It was called the virtual cow, and this was really a training of simulation, that we should do this type of things before we start killing animals, killing people, and making crazy experiences in our lives. So, virtual environments, simulation models, and things like this are today absolutely necessary for improving our skills before we make mistakes and make wrong things.
Yeah, because Antonio, if I could just tell you...
A short comment from you, please.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I can tell you where this picture, or why this picture came into one of my presentations, because I was actually presenting at one of Sweden's, or the main agricultural college in Sweden. And we were talking about this whole business about presence or online, or presence or virtual. And I was trying to think of something where people would say, no, you absolutely must do this in real life. You can't possibly simulate this. And the question of sticking your hand up the backside of a cow came up, because that's something that vets have to learn how to do, right? And it turns out that actually using the virtual...
Fantastic example. Fantastic.
Yeah, and you see, it turns out that the virtual cow, not only does it train vets better than a real cow, it also turns them into better vets when they've started on the virtual one. And then later, of course, sooner or later, they need to progress to the real one, because what they're doing with their hand up the bum of a cow is doing things like feeling out where its womb is and what way up it is and stuff like that. And the great thing is with this virtual cow is that it does react if the vet or the trainee vet is too heavy-handed, squeezes too much. So that's why I thought, right, let's find something that people would say, no way could you do this virtually. And we discover that not only can you, it actually works better.
See, another important thing when we, let's say, enter in virtual environment is that online tutoring, is it absolutely necessary when we are teaching in distance learning environment?
Yeah, well, I came across a very interesting comment from somebody who's been investigating these multi-user MOOCs in the United States. And what this particular researcher had discovered from looking at several of these MOOCs was that what you needed was MOOC plus and what the researcher called active teaching and active learning. Now, what is that but online tutoring? So, in other words, I can imagine some types of online courses which could survive without online tutoring. Yep. But on the other hand, it works so much better with. And I think the big mistake that a lot of MOOC designers make is that they believe that it's the material that's going to teach itself. And of course, if that were true, think of all these libraries we've got everywhere. What would you need universities for if you've got a university library?
What you told me about 4 years ago about this, I should say 99% yes, and I say no more about this, because this is really enough that you put pressure really in online tutoring.
Yeah.
It is absolutely necessary, no doubt about it. Let's go in the next topic. Do you think that virtual classrooms should be primarily aimed at teaching traditional lessons, or shall we use them in a different format? As well, I have this comment from you, and I would like to know if you still going on supporting this comment.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because there's no virtue at all in using a virtual classroom to teach traditionally. You might just as well record it in advance and distribute the recordings. What you've got to do is change the way you think, and change the way you think about what teaching is, what learning is, what a student is, what a teacher is, and what the material is. Because all of a sudden you discover that, yeah, things do it becomes a different type of experience. Just to give you one, banal example. I mean, in a real classroom, in a real world presence classroom, there's all sorts of reasons why students don't just get up in the middle of a boring lecture and walk away. But in a virtual classroom, they can do that easily. They just have to click a switch and they're gone. So the question for the teacher in that environment is, why don't they? Or what can we do to make sure that they don't do that, that the experience is so good that they want to keep on having it? And that's one of the things that I like about using virtual classrooms. But yeah, I mean, my third comment.
Be a real good teacher to keep the attention of your students in virtual environment, because as you mentioned, they just click and they go. If the quality of the presentation is not motivating enough, and so on and so on. So let's say you need a lot of much more skills and motivation capacity. Yeah. Now, comment the importance of attending virtual classrooms from anywhere, let's say using a PC and things like this.
Well, as it happens, Antonio, I've started a brand new course about 3 weeks ago, which is aimed at university teachers across Europe who need to learn to deliver their content in English instead of in their native language, right? Now, you can see straight away that if you were going to try and gather people together physically and have a presence classroom somewhere, the whole thing would become so complicated it just wouldn't work. And as it is, we've got about, I think we've got 50 places on this course. I mean, as it is, the students themselves, despite the fact that they are all from EU countries, are absolutely all over the world, from Arizona to South Australia, up to the Arctic Circle in Sweden. They're absolutely everywhere. And for them, it's a question of, if you like, just-in-time teaching, because they're all people who need to develop these skills for very practical reasons, because they've suddenly got a load of students they have to teach in English, and they themselves are not totally sure of if they've got the skills for it. They don't know the words, so that's what we're going to.
Theo has more or less the same opinion as you are, and let's go to the next question. How about good practices? Good practices are really extremely important in our environment, not only from technical point of view, but as well from pedagogical point of view. Philippe Carrera, he just emphasized that I should say that the most difficult thing is not to use a virtual classroom from the technical point of view. That is difficult is to change habits and methods. You should motivate, as you mentioned before, dynamize, catalyze the learning process. But Pedro Marques, professor of Autonomous University in Barcelona, teachers must have essential skills in ICTs and recommended skills, depending on the level of the teaching and scientific contents they are presenting. George Simmons have a very peculiar opinion about this subject. George Simmons says, first, teachers training in new technologies and new methodologies. Second, teachers training in new technologies and new methodologies. And third, teachers training in new technologies and new methodologies. How about David Richardson's opinion?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with the previous speakers. I mean, I can see George Siemens' experience is exactly that which I and my colleagues have had. One of the points that I would make again is the fact that the technology is getting better and better and easier to use. So it's tending to put an even greater emphasis on new methodologies and new skills for teachers. And one of the questions that we've faced a lot is, how do you get teachers to develop this type of new methodology? The traditional method of doing it within most schools and universities is to send someone on a course. And of course the problem is, even if they learn something from going on a course, it usually doesn't stick. So rather what we've been going for is something that's much more like an apprenticeship model, where you have colleagues who are, if you like, better at using, A, at using the technology, and B, at making it work properly, who are working side by side with colleagues who are learning, so that you can develop this transfer of good practice from the people who've got more experience to the people who've got less. And because the colleagues learn what they need at the time that they need it, in our experience, that knowledge tends to stick. So we don't go on courses. We work together so that we can transfer ideas from one to the other. But of course, the problem is for an organization or an institution like a university is, how do you spread good practice through the entire university? And that is a question which I haven't yet seen a really good answer to yet. I've seen it in some places, but we haven't worked out how to do that yet.
Okay, David, how about conclusions? Before you present your own conclusions, I would like to quote Joe Simmons. Joe Simmons says that evolve from a presence teaching to distance teaching is not an easy task. You need a virtual classroom, which is not to replicate a presence classroom environment with a new technology, a new tool. You must use a new semantic, a new storyboard, a new written, and use multimedia contents. Because if you are in virtual environment, things are becoming very boring, very, very fast. So you must be much more written, much more activities. Otherwise, many people will get asleep, or they will just click you mentioned before. Another important work is necessary to adapt and adjust everything. Because if you have your lessons organized to be presented in a presence classroom, you need to adjust them to virtual environment. And that is a must. Okay, presence lessons are not organized to be presented in virtual environment, but they are a big help. They are a big support to convert them into. But the most important thing is the teacher skills. Can you please comment these topics?
Sure, absolutely, yeah, because I think, again, because I don't see there as being a total split or difference between the presence classroom and the virtual classroom. I don't see them as two different things. They're just more like tools that you might want to use if you've got them available for different things. And I think one of the biggest challenges that we've got now is to integrate the presence classrooms with the virtual classrooms to make sure that there is actually a seamless experience for the student from, if we are using presence, that what we do in a presence classroom links seamlessly into what we do in a virtual classroom. And we've come up with some interesting ways of doing that. But I think that's basically the challenge that teachers face. But as George Siemens' last point, I think, is very, very important. That one general observation that I have made over the last 20 years is that if you try and teach in a virtual classroom and you don't devote your time and energy into learning how to do it and change the way that you work, then the virtual classroom is not going to work. I mean, the students will just disappear. They'll just evaporate. And your university or your organization will have devoted a lot of resources to creating this virtual classrooms, more or less for nothing, with very, very poor results. Whereas on the other hand, if you empower the teachers and work and see to it that the teachers understand what they're doing and become good at it, then you'll find that you'll be in a virtuous circle where things keep getting better. And that's, I think, a universal lesson that I can draw from the last 20 years.
Thank you, David. But before we finish, you mentioned before something as well about MOOCs and other formats of distance teaching that you would like to comment. Please,
sure.
The floor is yours. Go on.
Yeah, well, first of all, if we think of these, massive open online courses, these MOOCs, one of the things that I notice about them, and when they sort of came on the radar screen a couple of years ago, is that when you actually analyse what they are, they're things which we people in Europe have been doing for, you know, not just years, but decades, centuries even. You know, it's just that they've come to North America now. Now, one of the things that I've noticed as well is if you actually look at where the MOOCs, what kind of courses and what sort of subject areas MOOCs started in, you'll find that computer science is heavily overrepresented. And what we were talking about earlier was the idea that, okay, why is it that computer science and things like basic mathematics are very popular as MOOCs? They're what people think of first when it comes to, you know, what should we do a MOOC on? Well, one of the observations I would make is that those subjects have actually got fairly straightforward answers to questions. So it's a lot easier in some respects to create some sort of checking of what is being learned. Whereas if, on the other hand, if you look at any area where interpretation comes into it, and the example I gave you before we started was the example of law, jurisprudence, and particularly if you think about something like commercial law. Okay, in this situation, does law number X apply? Well, all of a sudden we're not into areas where there are simple yes-no answers. And they're ones which involve a great deal of interpretation, not only by the teacher, but also by, you know, supreme courts and things like this. So it means, therefore, that you can, what shall I say, the challenge for MOOCs is to start creating MOOCs which can be run with courses or with subjects which involve interpretation as well as getting the right answer. I think that they can be done, but the mistake I think a lot of MOOC makers have made so far is that they somehow think that the material is going to teach itself. So therefore they don't need to invest so much time, energy and resources and money in creating, you know, for example, groups of online tutors and mechanisms for doing online tutoring. And I think what we're discovering now, as MOOCs have been running a couple of years, is that no, it doesn't. I mean, the material doesn't teach itself. If that were the case, you wouldn't need universities. You'd only need university libraries. And you could say to people, go in, get a book, there you go. You don't need teachers. And time and again, it's been demonstrated that, yeah, unfortunately, you do need teachers. You know, we are a bit awkward and costly and so forth, but nobody's found a way of getting rid of us yet. So I think when MOOCs work that out, they'll work.
In fact, MOOCs has several plus and several minus. I should say, from my experience, I've already participated in seven MOOCs, which means that I could see some good work and some lousy work. But in a certain way, I can say that we are returning to e-learning 1.0, which was delivering the contents and the student should study and point. Period.
Yeah.
Which means the difference is between now it's supported in multimedia contents and before it was just supported in PDFs. But there are some important aspects from the pedagogic point of view they are not fulfilled, which is there is no tutoring, online tutoring, because it's impossible to make online tutoring for 1,000, 10,000, 500,000 students at the same time. Another thing is not organized very well group work to be done. Just forums, just you say blah blah and blah blah and blah blah and blah blah. Nothing else. Continuous formative evaluation. It's not a function which is not available as well. And so interactivity is the same minus in this aspect. From my point of view, and I'm preparing a MOOC for chat, we are working in order to integrate these technical aspects and this methodological environment to make MOOCs more efficient. Because the way I see that MOOCs are going on today, it's more a marketing strategy for several universities show up in the web than effectively a good teaching and learning process.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, Antonio, you could say that the number or the percentage of people who can teach themselves that way is about the percentage of people who succeed on a MOOC, which seems to be around about 1%. And so, in other words, I wouldn't say they'll never work in their current form, but they're likely to work for 1%. So my job is to teach the 99%.
Each one of us, we are learning how to behave in MOOC environment from pedagogical and technological point of view.
Yeah.
But our time is short and we are near about hand. Just a final comment. Concerning teaching skills, we are working in offering a master on which you cannot have idea if you go to this site, and which involve several aspects of using new methodologies, new technologies, online tutoring, making videos, and all these things absolutely necessary for working in distance teaching. And thank you very much, David. It was a pleasure as always. A very rich comments and enriching to listen to you. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Antonio.